Hello everyone, welcome to PC Diviner World. Today I wanted to do something that I haven't seen many people do or even talk about this band a lot, and that's rank the albums of Toto. And I actually searched on YouTube. I've only found two videos where someone ranked them. One is Pete Pardo on Sea of Tranquility. He did it last year, I believe. And then some other guy did it someone in Europe did it like 10 years ago. So I wanted to do that, and they're not a band that's talked to a lot. I've talked about a lot on the VC, or many people even talk about them, period, in the US, but they have 12 studio albums, but fans of the band might say, well, their last album was called Toto XIV. So what they did was they had an album about 20 years ago that was a compilation of outtakes and unreleased tracks, and they also had a covers album in the early 2000s. They counted those two in their discography, so that's where the 14 comes from. They actually have just like 12 regular studio albums. I didn't include the covers album because it's kind of just it's not that great, and it would probably be ranked last anyway. Nothing spectacular on there. It just sounds like a sort of like a lounge band doing covers. But Bobby Kimball is on that one. I believe that's his last, or no, maybe it's the second to last one. But so anyway, of course, Toto in the U.S. is mostly known for three songs: "Hold the Line," "Rosanna," and "Africa." Africa, in the last few years, has become sort of has a resurgence, and Weezer did a cover of it and everything. They were always sort of known as like a musician's band, or like sort of like the definition of yacht rock. Totally uncool, but of course they have Steve Lukather, the Pocaro brothers, David Paik, and those guys, if you own any albums from the 70s or early 80s by any solo artist, those guys are most likely on there. They even were pretty much the backing band for a lot of the Thriller album. A lot of people know Eddie Van Halen played the solo on Beat It, but it was actually Steve Lukather who did all the other guitars. It's not Eddie that does all the rhythm guitars and the main riff of the song. So also Steve Lukather's played on, I bet he's played on probably more top 40 hits than anyone besides maybe Paul McCartney or George Harrison. John Lennon, or maybe the Wrecking Crew. He's played everything from Don Henley to Boz Scaggs to Cher. All those 80s hits pretty much probably have Steve Lukather on it. So they all worked on different albums throughout the 70s. David Paik wrote a lot of the Boz Scaggs stuff, and record company gave them a record deal, and they grew up with Steve Lukather. He was a few years younger than them, so they formed Toto and put out their debut, which was a big success in the U.S. Had Hold the Line, I'll Supply the Love, some other songs that were big hits. Sort of drifted off into obscurity until Toto IV, which was the huge album with Rosanna and Africa. Then after that, they've had a bunch of personnel changes throughout the years. Have had actually only three lead singers besides Paik and Lukather, who also sings a lot of songs as well. But we'll go through that sort of the history while I rank these albums. So coming in at number 12, and I don't think they have a bad album in their catalog. They all have something that has a few good songs on it, some better than others. So this is Falling in Between, their last studio album with Bobby Kimball, 2006. He came back into the band in the late 90s and recorded two albums, Mindfields and Falling into Infinity, or Falling in Between, I'm sorry. And the covers album I mentioned earlier. This one is a little disjointed. The song Falling in Between, and when you put this CD first on, you might think you're listening to Dream Theater if someone didn't tell you this is Toto. So that's another thing. They've done all styles of music, from pop, rock, yacht rock, sort of jazzy, piano ballads, harder rock stuff, a little bit of prog here and there. And throughout the 90s, even incorporated some more modern rock sounds. They're still huge in Europe from the 90s on. Still playing arenas and stadiums in Europe. The US, they've never had that classic rock status. So they rarely play in the US. They played on their farewell tour a couple of years ago, but they're supposed to return again. But this one, I just think it's kind of boring. Even the Lukather songs are eh. One of the best songs on here is a song called Simple Life that Steve Lukather written and sung. But the problem is that the arrangement is really weird. It has 2 verses and like 1 chorus, and then the song just ends. No guitar solo, no 3rd chorus or anything, and it's like a 2-minute long song, so it's kind of weird. Taint Your World is sort of like a tribute to Van Halen. Very Hot for Teacher-ish. It's okay. The problem with this one is it almost sounds like 2 separate bands. It sounds like the Toto led by Lukather from the 90s without a lead singer. And then the songs that Bobby Kimball sings, it seems like they were just giving him something to do. It doesn't really sound like a band altogether. It's just kind of disjointed. It's a pretty good sounding album. It's also missing Simon Phillips, who had left by this point. So it comes in last for me. Next up, I'm going to rank their last album, Toto XIV. So Joseph Williams had come back to the band, the singer from Fahrenheit and the 7th one. He had come back to the band, I guess, around 2010 or so. So they've only recorded 1 album with him back in the band. First song, Running Out of Time, is really good. Burn, Holy War. All these songs are all pretty good. There's a song on here called Chinatown, which dates back to the first album, I believe. And you can tell because it really does sound like early Toto. But a lot of the other songs, especially the Lukather songs, are not that great. Everything's well produced, well written, well played, but it's just missing that something that makes it click. But overall, it's okay. Next up, I'm going to, this might surprise a lot of people, but I'm going to rank Fahrenheit next. It's 86, I believe. So this is the first album with Joseph Williams after Freddie Fredrickson did 1 album with them. Joseph Williams, of course, the son of composer John Williams, who did Star Wars and everything. So a couple of hits on here, Till the End and I'll Be Over You, which was sung by Lukather. And there was another song they had a video for called Without Your Love. It was very R&B pop-ish. Almost sounds like 80s Earth, Wind, and Fire in a way. But the funny thing is, they did this 2 albums in a row where they get a new lead singer and then they release singles with either David Paik or Steve Lukather singing. I mean, granted, they might have been the better songs on the album, but it's kind of odd that you would get a new lead singer and not feature him in the singles. But overall, this album is very pop-ish, very R&B-ish. I don't know if that, not R&B like 70s R&B, but like 80s pop R&B. There's actually an instrumental that ends this called Don't Stop Me Now that has Miles Davis on it. I call this their kind of like their Sunday brunch album because it reminds of music like you would hear like in a restaurant in Sunday brunch or something. But there's good playing, good singing on it, but just not anything that even remotely comes close to their classic stuff. But kind of a disappointment there. Next up is their 1995 album Tambu. And this one is the second of the albums where Steve Lukather was basically the lead singer. They were down to almost like a 4 or 5 piece band. Simon Phillips had joined the band after Jeff Pocaro had passed away. This is his first album with the band. I would say about half of this album is really good. Gift of Faith is really good. I Will Remember is this ballad where it has one of those melodies where you hear it and you think you know the song, like it's from a movie or something, I think it was a big hit in England. Slipped Away is pretty good. Drag Him to the Roof is a good rocker. Dave's Gone Skiing is a really good instrumental. The problem is that there's a bunch of sappy Lukather ballads on here that just are not that great. It's sort of like every other song on here is pretty good, but the other ones are kind of a throwaway. I don't understand why on this album and the previous album, Kingdom of Desire, David Page didn't sing any songs. They didn't get a lead singer, but they had Lukather sing all the songs. So I thought that was kind of odd. This is not as heavy as Kingdom of Desire. There's a little bit of that feeling on there, but the thing about this album is it really sounds really good. In fact, I think this won a Grammy for Best Engineered Album, even though nobody had heard of this in the US while it was out. Simon Phillips plays on here. The drums are awesome. But Gift of Faith is a pretty good song, the opening track. A lot of these albums in the bottom half, I ranked higher or lower based on only a couple songs because they're, pretty equal in quality, about half really good songs, half kind of throwaways. Next one I'm going to rank is their 1999 album, Mindfields. And I was surprised when I listened to all these in the past month or so. I revisited all of them, and in my mind, I was going to rank this one last, actually. But as I listened to it again, it's actually a lot better than the ones I just talked about. So this is the first one where Bobby Kimball returns to the band, and it's pretty good performance. Sounds really good. Another well-produced album. Simon Phillips on drums. Problem with this one, it's one of those albums that's like 75 minutes. The songs go on way too long, about a minute or two each song. So even if you took a minute off of each song, there's 14 songs on here. That's another issue. So they should have just eliminated like a minute from each song, and they would have got down to like 60 minutes. But another album where about every other song is really good. They could have easily gotten rid of about 3 songs on here, and it would probably have been a really solid album. Let's see here. Cruel is pretty good. Caught in the Balance. That's why I rank this one a lot higher than the others. That's a pretty good song. The Lukather songs on here are all pretty good. There's a couple of stinkers, but the song No Love, that should have been a hit, I believe. A lot of these later albums from the 90s on, if these were rebranded as another band and given to radio stations, they might have had a chance to be played because they don't sound like classic Toto, and they sound like hits to me. There's a song on here called Better World, which is mostly instrumental, and that's another one where you would think you were listening to Dream Theater. There's one David Page sung song on here, Spanish Steps. That's not that great, but overall, this is I would say a pretty solid album. So this is where I think. So how did we go through? We went through 5. So yeah, the rest of the albums I would say are all very good or better. So next up, I'm going to put their 1980 album or 81. Turn Back. This is their 3rd album. Their 2nd album, Hydra, didn't do that well. I think it just went 1 times platinum. And the record company wanted to do more of an arena rock album. But this album's pretty solid. Gift with the Golden Gun, English Eyes. Turn Back is a good song. I Think I Could Stand You Forever. The one song I really don't like here is the one they released as a single, Goodbye Eleanor. It's kind of like this frantic song with all these different parts. It's a well-played and well-written song. Just the chorus is just not that good. I'm surprised they released that as a single. They should have released English Eyes as the single from here. I think that would have been more of a hit. But overall, this is a pretty solid album. I don't think Bobby Kimball sings more than like maybe 2 or 3 songs on here, if I'm thinking of it correctly. But that's that. Next up, I'm going to rank Isolation. So this was the follow-up to Toto IV. Bobby Kimball, by that point, almost had supposedly blown his voice out, and he had some other drug issues, including legal issues. So they get a singer, Freddie Fredrickson, I believe your name is pronounced. And they put this out. It came out in '84. And they completely changed their sound from Toto IV to this. This is like almost like a... This is really like an arena rock album compared to Turn Back. If someone put this on, you might say, well, is that Survivor or is that whoever? But this is actually ranked really high by most people as one of their best albums. And I think it has a lot of great songs. It's just that the production is so 80s. This is definitely their most 80s production. I think this is where Steve Lukather got his reputation of having a very processed guitar tone and everything. But there is some really great songs on here. Isolation is one of my favorite songs from them ever. Again, they did the same thing they did on Fahrenheit, where the first single from the album was Stranger in Town, which is sung by David Paich. So it's kind of odd they're not trying to feature their new lead singer. But Stranger in Town, Isolation, Holy Anna, The Lion is a great song. Endless. Endless should have been a big hit. I'm surprised it wasn't pushed as a single. It could have even been another big hit for another artist. But overall, this album is, from start to finish, very good. It's just the production, I think, holds it down a little bit. That's unfortunate. The singer left the band. I believe he was having vocal problems. And that's where Joseph Williams came in. Which, speaking of, we're into the top 5 now, and number 5 is going to be the first album of Joseph Williams, the 7th one. I think this album is really good, actually. Much improved over Fahrenheit. This is more of a rock version of this band. It still has that 80s production, but not as bad as Isolation or Fahrenheit. Two fairly big songs on here: Pamela, Stop Loving You. A couple of fan favorite songs on here: Home of the Brave, and what was the other one? Only the Children. I don't know. Oh yeah, Anna's the one that's sung by Steve Lukather on here. That's kind of like a fan favorite. I think it's a really kind of cheesy ballad. I'm not really crazy about that one. There is a song on here though, Stay Away, which the chorus is sung by Linda Ronstadt, actually, and it's probably the heaviest song she's ever been on. That's a pretty good song. I don't know if this album... I remember some of these songs at the time being popular on like VH1, but I don't recall them, Toto the band, being that popular then. I didn't start getting these albums till much later on, but this is definitely a really solid album. So, getting into the top 4 now. This one, I was debating whether to go to number 3 or number 4. I only gonna knock it down a notch because it's not a typical Toto sounding album, even though it's one of their best, really, and that's Kingdom of Desire. So this is the first album of the 90s. They're basically down to a 4-piece now, which is Jeff Pocaro, Mike Pocaro, David Paich, and Steve Lukather. Jeff Pocaro, unfortunately, had passed away after making this album. This is overall definitely their heaviest album. Isolation is probably right up there, but that's more 80s sounding. This definitely is a modern 90s sounding album. There's some really heavy songs on here. Gypsy Train. She Knows the Devil. Kingdom of Desire is a really great, long, not ballad, but slower, heavy song. Wings of Time is a really good song. They had a video for this called Don't Chain My Heart. I remember seeing this on actually VH1 all the time. And it's funny because I believe Joe Cocker has a song with the same title, and it almost sounds like that song. And that's more of like a bluesy R&B-ish song. Doesn't really fit the rest of the album. I wish they would have done another, like Wings of Time or Kingdom of Desire as a single off of here. If you ever read Steve Lukather's book, he goes into how the record company president hated them. And this album came out 6 months later after the rest of the world. And it was huge around the world, but in the U.S., they dropped the ball on it. But this should be considered one of the best albums of the 90s, but it's never talked about. But even if you're only a casual Toto fan, where you're like the first couple albums, I would definitely try to get this one too. Especially if you're a Steve Lukather fan, this is where he really takes over the band as his. Okay, coming in number 3, I'm going to rank Toto IV. Their huge, big album with Rosanna and Africa. It's probably like their most diverse album as far as different styles of music. Afraid of Love is a good rocker. There's a couple songs on here I'm not that crazy about. Make Believe and We Made It, I think, are just like, eh. That's why I don't believe this is their best album. It's a Feeling is kind of just there. Lovers of the Night's pretty good. Waiting for Your Love. A lot of these songs are just sort of like lightweight adult contemporary. This album is sort of like the definition of yacht rock, even though this album came out in '82, which is sort of like the very end of the classic yacht rock era, kind of. But what else is on here? Make Believe. I Won't Hold You Back. That was Steve Lukather's sort of, I believe, first big ballad. Kind of slow. I've never been that crazy about it, but of course this album sounds really good. It's Bobby Kimball's last album with the band until he came back from Mindfields. And, you know, Toto's a band that didn't have much luck throughout the years. And, of course, they didn't tour for this album when it was huge. It won a bunch of Grammys. By the time they toured for Isolation, they were sort of had lost their popularity in the U.S. already. So they've made a bunch of bad business decisions that sort of have affected their career. So anyway, that's number 3. My number 1 and 2, I kept going back and forth of, you know, which one is my favorite and then which one is my, do I think is the best. And so what I'm going to do is put my favorite at number 2 because I don't think it's their best album, and that's their second one, Hydra. This is known as their prog album. I mean, there's a little bit of prog elements on here, but nothing too crazy. Hydra, the title track's an awesome song. St. George and the Dragon. 99 was sort of a little bit of a hit. All Us Boys was a single, I believe. White Sister is a long rocker with this long extended guitar solo at the end. But overall, this was supposed to be a concept album, but I believe there's only 2 songs that actually relate to the story. I believe it's just Hydra and St. George and the Dragon. But yeah, this is a really good album. And number 1, I have to put the debut there. This is a pretty awesome album from start to finish. Child's Anthem, I'll Supply the Love, Georgie Porgy, Girl Goodbye, Rockmaker, Hold the Line, and Angela. You know, how many songs? Every album they got a song with a female's name, you know? It's like Angela, Rosanna, Anna, Leah, Melanie, Carmen. It just goes on and on. But yeah, this one is well-produced, well-written album. It's one of the best debuts in history, but it's never really talked about too much. But yeah, I would definitely, if you're a casual fan of these guys, I would definitely probably pick up the first 4, the 7th one, and Kingdom of Desire. So that's it. That's my rankings. I know everyone's in the VC's been waiting for it because you're all huge Toto fans, right? Anyway, if you like these videos, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.